Hey y'all, welcome to Raijin Radio, episode 2. Today we're going to be talking about the Yakuza, the facts and the fictions of them. Now, first before we get started on that, I do want to say I did listen to some of the feedback. Yes, I know the last episode the microphone was a bit low, and I know you guys had to turn your volume up on your phones. I do apologize for that. Um, I messed with the settings a little bit today. I'm using OBS or Open Broadcast software, and hopefully this helps. We'll see. The couple of test little quick videos I did sounded okay to me, but once it's rendered, we'll see. And I'm also a little bit closer to the mic this time, so hopefully I'm not blowing your eardrums out. Now, I know I put a poll up on Facebook for what to choose between whether it was going to be the Yakuza, the nightlife, or the food culture of Japan. Well, food culture is going to have to wait. I do want to have a guest come in and speak about that. A good friend of mine who actually spent many years in Japan and married into a Japanese family. And he'll be on at a later episode when we discuss the food culture. Um, as far as nightlife is concerned, I will do my own segment on just the nightlife itself, but I'm gonna let you know a lot of the nightlight stuff, or excuse me, a lot of the nightlife stuff that I'm gonna talk about today is, well, it's directly tied to the Yakuza. So when you hear about it again in the next episode, just remember what I'm about to tell you. I'm just going to go over the basics of it and what they are, and then you'll kind of get a better understanding of how the inner workings of those work next time. I'm just strictly talking about how the Yakuza will actually, how they control everything here. Also different from the last video slash podcast, I now have a slideshow going. So I chose a bunch of images. They are all Yakuza related. No, there is no Yakuza video game images in here. Excuse me, no, there are no Yakuza video game images in here. Um, so hopefully it's a little bit better to look at than just a single frame. Yes, you will see them loop over. I've got them set to about a 4 minute or so time loop. So we'll see how that works out. So without any further ado, let's talk about the Yakuza. So, for those of you who know me, you know that I was born and raised in Sicily. So, growing up around the Mafia, it's really kind of just a fact of life there. And frankly, the Japanese Yakuza, or the Yakuza, the Japanese Mafia, they share a lot in common with the Sicilian Mafia, the Italian Mafia. Yes, there is a difference. Um, and all the other mafias that exist out there. Obviously, they are a criminal organization, so they do criminal stuff. That goes without saying. Um, One big difference between the Yakuza and the Mafia is with the Mafia, in order to get made, you usually either have to be a blood relative or be sworn up by a higher ranking member. And that is the case with the Yakuza as well, but it's a little bit different in how they repay loyalty and disloyalty. So let's talk about the word Yakuza. What does it mean? Well, as far as all the research I've done is concerned, it literally means good for nothing. And now, keep in mind this could be incorrect, but everything I found on it points to a Japanese game called Baccarat, which you probably have seen in some Bond videos. Um, but supposedly, the name Yakuza comes from the cards 893, or Yakuza. Yes, I know that they are pronounced a little bit differently in Japanese, but supposedly that's the worst hand, therefore it's a good for nothing hand. So in a way, if you are a Yakuza, you were dealt a crappy hand in life that's good for nothing, so you might as well make what you can out of it. Now, like I said, take that with a grain of salt. I'm sure that there are many reasons and legends as to why the Yakuza are called the Yakuza. So, what are the Yakuza exactly? So, when you hear the word Yakuza, you think, okay, well, that must mean the entire criminal organization. And that is mostly true. However, when you hear the word Yakuza, it could be referring to an individual in that organization, or it could mean the organization itself. Now, the organization, just like the Mafia, is broken up into different families. Now, a lot of times these families cooperate with each other, and a lot of times they fight with each other. So you'll have what they call, sorry for the pronunciation, but they're called Boryukudan or Gokudo. And basically, that's a literal translation for violence groups. They're not exactly subtle with what they call these guys. These violence groups are what you would consider, like in the Mafia, you've got the Brenzini family and the Pesky family, etc. Right? It's very similar in Japan. So, as far as their organization structure is concerned, you have your chairmen who are in charge of the overall main clan. They are the top guy. That's who everybody answers to, and God help you if you get on his bad side. Then it breaks down into individual families. So you've got a main clan, and then you've got families within that clan. So as far as the structure on that is concerned, you've got your family patriarch, who is usually who that family is named after. Now, if that patriarch dies, they don't then become a different family name because that patriarch's dead and they got to rename it after the new guy. They keep that family name, and then the new guy just becomes patriarch of a family that doesn't have his name. That's just kind of the way it is. You have captains, you have lieutenants, you've got your enforcers. Those are the guys you really want to be on the good side of. And then, of course, you've got your standard street-level thugs and scum. As it stands right now, there's actually only about 39,000 or so members, active members that are known in the Yakuza right now. And that doesn't really seem like a whole lot. And quite frankly, in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't. I mean, if you look at many of the gangs that we have here in America, I mean, shoot. They'd wipe the floor with those numbers. But remember, that's active members. They have a lot of other associates that they work with who are not Yakuza. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But they do a lot of work with foreigners who are essentially Yakuza in everything but name. So their numbers are not exactly well represented here. It is going to grow soon, or those numbers will expand soon, and I'll get into that in a minute. The largest group that exists right now is the Yamaguchi Gumi. Now, I'm not going to go into the history of the Yamaguchi Gumi or any of these other families or anything like that. I'll save that for somebody who's significantly more educated in these. Jake Adelstein is a reporter who has actually more or less infiltrated the Yakuza, and I do recommend you check out his reports on that. I'm basically here to just give you the rundown. So, let's talk about some of the fun stuff, then we'll talk about some of the not so fun stuff, and hopefully you'll have a better understanding on who these guys really are, because one of the things that is interesting is they're made out to be almost like these, benevolent, well-meaning people, through things like video games and movies and stuff like that. Obviously, you've got the, action movies where, all the bad guys are Yakuzas and they're dressed like ninjas for some reason, or they're dressed like samurai for some reason. But recently I've seen a shift in that to where you've got the good guy Yakuza against the bad guy Yakuza. And let's not mince words. They're still criminals. One thing that they have done recently, which is actually very good in my opinion, actually is involving immigration when it comes to Japan. So in Japan, there has been a recent movement of Japanese nationalism. Hopefully that doesn't go too far. We know where that took them last time. But essentially it's, Japanese supremacy. So if you're a foreigner, I don't want nothing to do with you. Kind of like how white supremacists and all that stuff work here. The Yakuza, they're not about that life. You would think they would be because, their members are pretty much all Japanese. They almost exclusively have Japanese bled-in members. But no, they actually are huge fans of immigration and tourism because that's where all the money comes from. See, they're not stupid. They are very, very business savvy. So one thing that they like to do is they like to show up to these protests where these Japanese nationalists are, and, well, they beat the hell out of these guys. I mean, they absolutely wreck them and tell them, hey, you better get a different thought in your head or else you're not going to have a head anymore. So that is one good thing that they do. I'm not saying that assaulting people is good. You really shouldn't do that. But when it comes to supremacists, sometimes they need some sense knocked into them. All right, so let's talk about the thing that everybody knows about the Yakuza. Their tattoos. So, their tattoos are called Itazumi. Now, as far as why they have these tattoos, well, people assume that they're tattoos, like most gangsters, you get your tattoos in prison and all that. That's not how it works with the Yakuza. In fact, a lot of these tattoos, well, almost all of them, have a specific meaning behind them. And yes, I am aware that there are, tattoos out there that have special meaning to special people and all that. But certain tattoos, if you see this tattoo on a person's back in Japan, then this is exactly what it means. So take that as you will. Traditional tattoos, or Irizumi, how they work there is essentially you go to a tattoo parlor and there's a master tattoo artist, they have their apprentice, and then you basically interview with that person. You tell them what your life story is, your line of work, what you do for fun, that sort of thing. And based off of what you tell that tattoo artist, that's going to be what your tattoo is going to represent. So, you can walk into a tattoo shop and point at a design and go, I want that, and they'll do it. But if you want a true Itazumi, that's the way to do it. So some of these meanings, I'm just going to go over 3 of them because there's, a bunch of different tattoo styles. But the most common ones that you're going to see are going to be the dragon, the koi fish, and the Hanaya. Now, the Hanaya is the demon mask looking thing. The white mask with its open mouth, red eyes. It's got horns on it. Now, that is actually meant for protection. That you can also use with a lion tattoo as well. But they are primarily meant for people whose chosen line of work is essentially fighting or protection, like bouncers, things like that. Essentially, the Hanaya is supposed to, watch your back at all times because you can't always watch your back while you're out there trying to watch others' backs. The dragon is actually quite interesting. It has several meanings, but the most common meaning is for a respected teacher. So not saying that you go over there and teach English and they're like, here's your dragon tattoo. But, somebody who is seen to be, of high caliber when it comes to the wisdom department. Then you've got the koi fish. Now, the koi fish is actually very common in tattoos there, mainly because of what it represents. The koi fish represents the struggle of life. So in Japanese lore, the koi fish swims upstream, and then when it finally gets upstream, it then evolves and becomes the dragon. So that's why a lot of gang members will have that tattoo because it represents their struggle in life. They grew up poor, they were orphans, broken households, that sort of thing. And basically they did whatever they had to do to make their life or the lives around them better. So the lives of their brothers or themselves. So it's really almost like their phoenix rising kind of thing. And yes, for the Pokemon fans out there, that is why a Magikarp turns into a Gyarados. The little carp fish turns into a big dragon. It's because of Japanese lore. So, how do they apply these tattoos? Well, there's the common misconception that these tattoos are done exclusively with stick and poke, aka a steel needle that is hammered into your skin like a chisel, and that's it. Well, that is the majority of high quality Irozumi that you will find. The majority of that work is done that way. However, a lot of the artists nowadays, tattoo artists, have also used tattoo guns for supplemental stuff like shading and things like that. So a lot of times if you're in a bit of a rush to get a tattoo, which you should never be, definitely plan out your tattoos, but if you're in a bit of a rush, they might do a little bit with the stick and poke method, they might do a little bit with the gun, and then basically hybridize it. Now, if you want to go full on Irozumi, then that tattoo will take a long time. I mean, the outline alone, you're talking, several sessions usually. It just depends on how long you're willing to lay there and let somebody stab you repeatedly. Now, as far as tattoos are concerned in Japan in general, tattoos are more or less seen as something that only criminals have. Because, well, the Yakuza have tattoos, therefore everybody else who has tattoos must be either criminals or, Yakuza affiliated or whatever. So, because of that, a lot of new Yakuza members, they actually don't get these tattoos anymore. So, it used to be, go into this area, there's a dude with a tattoo, he's Yakuza. Nowadays, he probably doesn't have that tattoo because they're trying to blend in. They don't want to be out in the open. They don't want to be, recognized as much as they can be recognized. However, that being said, the shift towards tolerance in Japan for tattoos is happening because Japan has a lot of foreigners that come through. For the Yakuza, the tattoo is a way of life. For foreigners, for lack of a better term, it's a way of fashion. And yes, I understand your tattoo has personal meaning to you, but it's a fashion statement as well. So they are starting to kind of ease off of their, I guess you could say, skepticism when it comes to people with tattoos. That being said, it doesn't mean that you can go anywhere with a tattoo. So, for example, personal experience, for those of you who don't know, I do actually have a tattoo. Just like a lot of the Yakuza, for example, my tattoo and any future tattoo that I get will be something that can be hidden by a t-shirt. Because I don't want everybody to know these tattoos. I want it to be where if you see my tattoos, then we're already at a next level. I don't want just normal people being like, oh, hey, let me see that, Now, when I was in Japan recently, and I was in a town called Iga, which is where the ninja are from, our Airbnb host, Gigi-san, he asked us, me and my grandpa, if we wanted to go to a public bathhouse with him. And we really did want to. We did. But then I said, just so you know, Gigi-san, my grandfather has a tattoo, and I have a tattoo as well. Is that acceptable there? And he goes, oh, no, they do not let tattoos in there. I was like, okay, well, I guess we got to miss out on that. But apparently there was a different bathhouse in that area that did allow tattoos. And that one, for lack of a better term, he discouraged us to go to. He said, I don't recommend you go there because the people who have the tattoos there are people you don't want to associate with, aka Yakuza. So we didn't go. I wanted to personally because, you know, I grew up around gangsters my whole life. It's not a big deal for me, but, you know, whatever. We didn't go. Also, I'm just not a big fan of being around a bunch of naked dudes all the time, so there's that. Now, as far as the tattoos are concerned, the guys who do have the tattoos, usually they will be, like I said, hidden or easily hideable. So, you know, you'll have, you know, they're almost always wearing long sleeve shirts or business suits or whatever, but, if, you know, face tattoos and neck tattoos, stuff like that doesn't really happen there all that often. But usually, when they have their tattoos done on their chest, there's usually a stripe of skin that goes down the middle. And that's done for a couple of reasons. The primary reason is you can walk around with your shirt unbuttoned and people aren't going to see the tattoos that are on your pectorals. They just see the stripe of skin and they go, oh, okay, normal person, don't need to worry about that. So that's pretty much all there is to really know on their tattoos as far as I know. Another thing that the Yakuza are known for is a practice called yubitsume, which literally translates to finger shortening. Yes, this is where they take their pinky or their little finger and they chop off a part of it. Why the hell would you do that? Well, it's a punishment. That's basically what it is. So, you know, you had a big deal that was supposed to go down, and you screwed up, and it didn't happen. Well, now the boss is mad at you, and he wants you to repent to him. So what do? Well, you don't run. They know where you're going to live. You know, they know where you're going to go. So one of two methods. One method is newer than the other. Is either you cut off a portion of your pinky and you present it to him in as a form of atonement, or you give them a giant stack of cash to basically say, I'm sorry. Now, the cash thing, that's more new than yubitsume, and the reason for that is, well, you have a part of your finger missing, people are going to notice, and remember, the Yakuza nowadays are trying to blend in more. Back in the past, they didn't really care about blending in so much. But you got a dude walking around missing part of his pinky in Japan, he's almost certainly Yakuza, you know. And in case you're wondering, well, what percentage of Yakuza went around lopping off their pinkies? It couldn't have been all that much. Actually, about 40% of the Yakuza are missing part of their finger. So, yeah. Now, how do they go about doing this? Well, it's pretty straightforward. You sit in front of the boss or the offended party, potentially a boss of another clan that you offended. You put your hand on the table, and you do it yourself. Somebody else doesn't do it for you. That's part of it. So you put your pinky out, and you put it on a little chopping board. You get your tanto, or your short knife, essentially. You put it over the top digit or top knuckle of the digit, and then you force your body weight down onto it until it pops off, essentially. So yeah, all kinds of fun. Definitely hurts a lot, but that's part of the point. Now, you may see in the slideshows coming up here, at some point there's going to be one guy with a regular yubitsume and another guy who's missing part of his pinky and also part of his ring finger. That's because yubitsume does not stop at the pinky. It continues on to each next finger. So, yeah. Now, why? Why are they forced to do this? Well, because back in the day, first of all, it was a punishment for gamblers who didn't pay their debts. So if you lost a big hand at Baccarat or whatever, and you're like, screw that, I'm not paying that debt, you would lose a part of your finger for that, because essentially you were stealing. The other thing is, back in the day, it made it harder to wield a sword. So for those of you who don't know Japanese swordsmanship, the little fingers are extremely important for control. So if you don't have those fingers, you don't have as good of a control over the sword as you could have. So usually what that means is, because you are now missing that finger, you're not able to defend yourself as well as you could have before. Therefore, you are now more reliant on your boss and his mercy to basically stay alive. So there's that. It's another thing that newer to Japan, obviously, that impacts would be golf. So golfing, you kind of need your fingers for that. Kind of hard to do without that. Also, it makes it a little bit harder to wield a gun correctly if you don't have all of your digits. Not saying you can't do it. You definitely can. But it helps to have everything intact. So, let's see here. What else are we going to talk about? Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about the darker side of the Yakuza, as if that wasn't dark enough. So, the Yakuza is heavily in charge of most of the Japanese nightlife that you're going to find. And, you'll see, like, right now, for example, in Japan, things like casinos don't really exist. I mean, they do. They're usually underground, very illegal, because gambling, as of right now, is illegal in Japan. However, in 2016, the Japanese government, and I will get to them again, trust me, the Japanese government basically said, all right, in 5 years' time, we're going to make gambling legal again. Well, that was back in 2016. So that means in 2021, the gambling is going to be legal again, which means that casinos will start popping up, which means that 39,000 member number I was talking about earlier is going to expand quite a bit. And why is that 5-year period really important? Well, the thing is, a lot of gangsters that go to jail in Japan, after a certain amount of time, your record gets expunged, depending on your crime, obviously. If you go in for sex crimes or for, murder or whatever, that never really gets fully expunged. But if you go in for larceny or racketeering, things like that, eventually those get taken off your record. And then you can own a business, like a casino. Funny how that works. So yeah, let's not mince words here. The Yakuza are absolutely going to utilize these people who are quote unquote reformed gang members for these casinos. Now, why in the hell would the Japanese government, who knows that gambling will bring more crime, why do they do that? Why? What? Like, it makes no sense, right? But it makes a lot of sense if you look into the actual Japanese government itself. So, the Japanese government has been primarily controlled by one of two parties. One party has been in control for 59 of the past 64 years. Yeah, that's a long time. That would be like if the Democrats here or the Republicans here were in charge for 59 of the past 64 years. That's a very, very long period of time for one party to be in charge. Now, the party that is in charge, or more or less is almost always in charge, is the LDP. That stands for the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan. That being said, yes, I know the word liberal and democratic is in the name. However, they are actually the Japanese right-wing conservative government. So they actually have really, really good relations with the Yakuza because this party is all about things like agriculture, construction, things like that. And who do you guys know who runs construction companies? Well, in the U.S., that union guy may or may not be mafia'd up. Very much the same thing with the Japanese Yakuza. Now, because they're buddy-buddy with the Yakuza, they get to have all kinds of access to certain illicit activities that the Yakuza do, and the Yakuza get to basically be left alone, more or less. Yes, you still have people that go to jail for their crimes and all that, but the Yakuza as a whole have certain sweetheart deals that go to them. So, for example, like, I don't know, opening casinos in a few years. That's going to definitely help the Yakuza quite a bit. Now, anybody who's been to Japan will say, but Ryan, there's these pachinko parlors all over the place, and those are definitely gambling halls. Yes and no. So they're not actually gambling halls. They are, essentially, they're giant arcades. And yes, I am aware that you, in some areas, can get money for your winnings or prizes. So that doesn't really count as a casino per se. But Japan has an interesting law where if you're putting money into a machine for entertainment purposes, aka gambling, and you then receive money for what you did, aka you won the hand or whatever, if that money exchanges hands in the same building, then it's considered a gambling hall, then it's illegal. Now, pachinko parlors, what they'll do to get around that is they'll have, the main pachinko machines and all that. A little ticket will print out, and then you walk down the street. You leave the parlor, you walk down the street, go around the corner, and then, what do you know? There's this helpful little shop that's there that just, they love collecting these tickets, so they pay you for the tickets. Weird. But you would think, Japanese cops, they got to be smarter than that. You got to figure that out, right? Well, they can't do anything about it because it's not in the same building, therefore, not really gambling. That's all going to change in 2021. Now these places don't have to do those kind of shady tactics. Now they can just do it out in the open. So anybody who knows anything about Las Vegas, for example, Las Vegas, up until very recently, and it probably still is, was basically born from the Mafia. Mafia went out there and were like, we got to make stupid amounts of money. How are we going to do it? That's how. And guess what? That same thing's going to happen in Japan soon. But, speaking of entertainment, what other kind of entertainment things do the Yakuza deal with? Well, I know it doesn't sound like entertainment to most of you, but human trafficking is one of those things that they do. So they do human trafficking for things like prostitution and sex tourism, stuff like that. Prostitution is pretty self-explanatory. You all should know what that is. Sex tourism is essentially where, a Japanese businessman or whatever will pay the Yakuza hefty amounts of money for the Yakuza to then ship them to a different country, say like Thailand, for example, the Philippines, whatever, into a more or less Yakuza affiliated area where those people will then have sex with minors, which is pretty friggin' gross in my opinion. But that's one of the many quote-unquote services they provide. One of the other things that they provide is a thing called host and hostess clubs. So I'll go into much greater detail into what those are in the nightlife episode. But essentially what a host and hostess club is, well, it's basically you're going and you're paying for the boyfriend/girlfriend experience, except you're not having sex with those people. So you go in and, there's a cover charge, you buy drinks and all that. A host or a hostess, depending on if you're a man or a woman, obviously, will then be seated with you. And then, you basically just have conversation with them and you build a rapport. It's timed. And then after X time, you can extend the period of time or you leave. It's up to you. It's quite expensive, actually. Usually, to get into some of these places, you got to pay, $50 cover charge or more. And then, if you want to request a specific person, well, there's a charge for that. There's a charge for the drinks, charge for everything. So essentially, their purpose in life is to get as much money out of you as possible. Now, how do the Yakuza benefit from that? Well, money. But the other way they benefit from that is blackmail. So if you're a dude who goes in and, blows his entire paycheck on something, in that hostess club, and then you can't pay the remaining balance, well, the Yakuza then blackmail you. So how do they do that? Well, they go after things like your family or your employer. So usually they start with the employer. So go to your boss at work and then say, hey, so just so you know, this idiot, he can't pay his debts. What are you going to do about that? He's your employee. He represents you. So what can happen is the boss will then pay your debt for you in shame, and then you get fired. So that's fun. But I'm going to be honest with you, the guys have it much easier than the girls do. Because the girls who rack up the debt, guess what happens to them? That's right, they get turned into sex slaves. And it's absolutely disgusting. What happens is, if you rack up the debt, the Yakuza will say, hey, well, you're a good-looking girl. You can work off the debt if you catch our drift. But the problem there is they turn you into essentially a slave for a long period of time, because what they'll do is they'll make you go to certain parties and stuff like that, for like big shots and all that. Like, say if a celebrity comes in and they want to party with a bunch of girls, right? Well, you get called up, you go to that party. Here's the thing. For the privilege of you going to that party and meeting this big shot, you have to pay for it. So whatever money you earned, now that tax comes out of it. Oh, and then there's the interest on top of the other stuff. So you see where this is going, right? This turns into a long kind of indefinite servitude. And it's a pretty crappy punishment for, having too good of a one night out. So if you do go over there and you partake in these clubs, just be very, very careful with your finances. Because, yes, they do this to foreigners too. Not as much, but they will do it to foreigners. The human trafficking side of things, kidnapping and stuff like that, does happen there. I'm not saying that it's like if you go to downtown Kabul, you're never going to show up again, things like that. It's not like that, but it can happen. If you, go to the red light districts of areas, well, sometimes things happen. But that's the red light district in any country in the world. One of the other things that they like to do is, well, I'm sure they do it, but one of the things they like to sell is drugs. So in Japan, drugs are extremely highly regulated. We're talking like medical marijuana, as of right now, would not even have a snowball's chance in hell of passing over there. They are extremely strict on that. So who's going to fill that need? Well, the criminals will. So one of the biggest things that they manufacture / import is methamphetamine and cocaine. Why the stimulants? Well, because when you're a Japanese businessman and you got to work 16 hours today, 6 days a week, you need a pick-me-up every now and again. So there's that. Also, cocaine, party drug. So people like to party out there, drinking all night, about to black out, don't want to miss the train, don't want to black out. Oh, hey, there's coke. Yeah. So wakes you up. So those are the most common drugs that you find over there. Opium and stuff like that, it does exist over there, but it's not like it was in China, for example, where that was kind of like the main thing. Over there, it's mainly methamphetamine and coke. Now, where do they get this meth? Well, they get it from one of the largest methamphetamine producers in the world, North Korea. Yes, that is correct. North Korea actually makes a ton of money selling meth to the triads, Chinese mafia, the Yakuza, um, little dictatorships all over Asia and stuff like that. Hey, you got to keep your soldiers up all night, right? Um, so yeah, that's a thing. Um, Back to North Korea again, though. Now there's a it hasn't been uh, confirmed yet, so this is very much rumor territory. But some of those pachinko parlors are rumored to be actually controlled by North Korea. So there's that. I don't know how valid that is, but definitely something that somebody should investigate. Don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but that's something that is worth looking into. Um, because, well, that government has to make money somehow, and they make money selling meth and running pachinko parlors right now, which could lead to a bit of an issue when those gambling halls become legal in Japan and they're not needed anymore for that particular side of the entertainment, but we'll see what happens. Arms trafficking. Yes, that definitely happens there too. Nowhere near as bad as it is in certain countries because, well, gun violence is almost non existent there. I think one year they had like 6 gun deaths, and that was including police shootings. So, yeah. But mainly, if a Yakuza's packing, they're not going to just pull a gun out to be like, oh, hey, check it out, I got a gun. Because having a gun in Japan actually can land you in a lot more trouble than having drugs. So, yeah. Um, but there is another side of that armor or the arms trafficking. So now, once again, this is rumor. So I have not personally been able to confirm it. But one of my good friends who has lived in Japan and served in Japan for a while in the military has told me that there are several service members, or former service members, I should say, who are in Japan working for the Yakuza as their armorers. So they went over there, they were Marines or Navy or Air Force, whatever. They worked in the armory. The Yakuza, they, pick up on these people. Like, you're out in the town, you're chit-chatting with a, cute little hostess or whatever. She finds out what you do. She tells her boss, etc., etc. And then eventually it gets to the local Yakuza that, hey, you're a potential target for recruitment. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that, they're going to tattoo you up and make you a full-on blood member. No, 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 no. But you're going to be one of those foreigners that they work with, like I was talking about earlier. So it's extremely lucrative. I mean, you're in the military. You don't usually make all that much. You get out of the military, and now you got these guys offering you, quite a hefty sum of money, and you get to live in Japan still. So, yeah, go for it. Don't go for it, obviously, but either way. So that's mainly most of their illegal activities that they do. Obviously, they got their hands into pretty much everything. They do have hitmen. They have essentially, what's the word I'm looking for? Con artists and stuff like that. They have grifters that, they do scams. There's a lot of scams are very, very big over there. Like if somebody comes up to you and says, oh, hey, can you sign this for a petition? You probably shouldn't sign it, because if you're signing it, you may be signing a contract that the Yakuza will then come after you for. But yeah, so you just got to be careful. That being said, I know I made it sound like, this gang-ridden hellhole, but I got to be honest with you, I've never felt safer than when I was in Japan. So don't let this entire podcast steer you away from going to Japan. No, don't. Absolutely not. Like, definitely go to Japan. It's a great country to go to. You just have to be smart about things, like if something seems too good to be true, like somebody says, oh, hey, you're a foreigner, let me help you with this exchange rate, or hey, Do you like or do you hate human trafficking? Sign here. You got to just be careful about that sort of thing. Um, I a lot of people, you have to remember these are predators, and they prey on weakness and the indulgence of society. So uh, you basically just want to be careful. I personally have actually run into a few Yakuza myself, and I mean, frankly, they didn't seem like bad guys to me. Then again, I didn't really get into, hey, what specific thing do you do? This was basically just having a couple of drinks, telling them about America. They tell me about the seedier side of life there, and that was pretty much all it was. So it was no different for me, anyways. It was no different than going to a restaurant in Sicily and hey, the local mafiosos there at the table with you. I mean, it's just life. Anyways, I've gone on for holy crap 45 minutes. Anyways, so hopefully the slideshows go through. It's been playing in the background here, so I hope this, and I also hope the audio came out much better too. So we'll see. Still need that. Still need that design for Raijin Radio. So if anybody knows where I can get that, that'd be great. Okay, awesome. Anyways, so that's Ryan from Raijin Radio. I'm gonna sign out, and I will see you next time.